want to make certain that everyone's palate is nice and moist when we get to getting into the meat of things. All right, so we're going to start from the left side. If you would, please give your name, your profession, and as soon as we get our other lone panelist. Again, give your name, your profession, and your level of credentialing. We're going to start here to my right.
Thomas White. I'm an educator in the Inkster School District, Charter School District, American International Academy. We have 3 schools, 2 currently open, about 500 students. I'm the superintendent there. I have the bachelor's, master's, working on the EDD.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Detective Andrea Elliott. I work for Eastern Michigan University Police Department. We do have some jurisdiction in the city and the county. I have been there for about 17 years. Started out with a bachelor's degree, actually, in English literature, which makes my reports pretty well written. And they like that. And I also went to Schoolcraft's Wayne County Regional Police Academy.
All right, thank you.
As many will know, Susan Wolford White. I'm a pediatrician at the University of Michigan, and I also studied public health as well.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Keith Bennett. I'm the director of Goodwill Industries, the Greater Detroit's Flip the Script program. We have served the largest amount of parolees returning to Detroit and Wayne County for the last 14 years. Currently, we serve the largest amount of probationers, 16 to 39 years of age. We have a full GED and literacy program. I have 3 undergraduate degrees, 1 in marketing, 1 in management and organizational development, and 1 in corrections administration.
My name is Keith Jones. I am the mental health social worker at the Ryan Reentry Center in Detroit. I work with inmates who are preparing to be released and whether max out or paroling back into the community. I also work with various juveniles who either in corrections or avoiding corrections, I should say. My undergrad actually is in communications, so I know what it's like to write and document well-documented reports. But my master's is in social work, mental health, and chemical dependency.
Good evening. My name is Karen Braxton. I'm a judge with the Third Circuit Court. That's all of Wayne County. I'm assigned to the Juvenile Division. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Rochester. I have a degree in economics and political science. And then I did law school at Case Western in Cleveland, Ohio, where I got my JD. I have been on the bench for the last 4 years, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this event.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Judy Thurman. I am a mental health service supervisor with Washington County Community Mental Health, where we service over 600 families in the Washington County area. My background, undergrad, is in criminal justice. I have a background working with youth who've been at the Maxie Boys facility. My master's is in mental health and chemical dependency. And I'm currently just about finished with my doctoral degree in family concentration.
All right, thank you all for being here. So we're going to start out with a very broad question, just to kind of tap into your own perspective, your own belief systems. Start with Ms. Thurman here. Who are our black youth of today? How would you define them?
Good question. I would define our black youth today as young people who are a fearless generation, young people who have some troubled issues, those who lack some coping skills, and I'm not talking about the majority of them, but the number of children that I've dealt with in the past maybe 15 to 20 years have been those who've come from broken homes, who have a lot of anger, looking for a purpose in life, and heavily probably influenced by social media. So kind of would define them
Okay.
in that sense.
All right, thank you. And we're going to come back to that social media piece. Ms. Braxton.
My position is a little different because I only see kids when they are either in trouble or when their families have failed to do something in a neglect case where a child is abused or neglected. So my perspective of where the black youth is today is that it's a lost generation. There's a lack of support from our communities. There is a lack of support in the household. There's a lack of support by the majority of our churches, and I'm not including this church because I'm sitting here right now. But overall, this generation appears to be extremely lost with no direction. And one of the reasons that I am sitting here today is to figure out how we can give some direction to our youth so they can be what others consider to be productive citizens of society.
All right, thank you. Mr. Jones.
The state of our black youth. Like Judge Braxton, I usually see inmates once they have found themselves in trouble and they have done something that has limited their future and caused them to be incarcerated. So it often looks bleak, but I also see a side of the youth that are very talented. They are doing things that other generations haven't done. So I get a chance to see the side that's not so bleak. Social media is a problem, and I know we'll get to that, but at the same time, it's a tool that youth can use to better themselves in a way that other generations cannot or have not been able to do. So on one side, things look dismal, but on another, I still am optimistic and I still see hope.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Bennett.
I concur with the previous statements. They are the greatest challenge that God has given us in this present day and age. They are the first generations that are afraid to dream, don't dream, but are hungry, and they need some direction. They aren't any different than the generations that came before them. They've just been abandoned and disenfranchised.
Wow, profound. Dr. White, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure that what I'm going to say is going to be much more hopeful either. From a health standpoint, it seems to me that the generation of black youth, in fact, youth across the board, have been saddled with some of the decisions that we as adults have made, and that because of the lifestyles we've taught them to live, they may have a shorter lifespan than the generation before them, which is not the direction it should be. Every generation has lived longer and longer and longer, but this one is likely to live a shorter, more impaired life than their parents. And that doesn't have to be the case. So I guess here's the hope. My hope is that we know what can free them from that sort of future, and I would hope that they would tap into that knowledge and be able to have a better life than the stats say that they will have.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Officer.
Wow. It's quite a question. As much as you would believe, I only see the lost children of our youth. I see a little bit of both, actually. They're polar opposites. Working on a college campus, we get a lot of young people that come from off campus who have no positive role models. We've had young men that come onto campus and commit crimes, and we find out that their fathers are in prison or in and out of jail. So that's the biggest problem I see, are young men with no positive role models. And we as officers, sometimes they don't always trust us, but when we have a few black officers that try to talk to them and say, hey, look, there are programs that can get you into a university if you just keep going to school, stop missing school. But then we also see the Early College Alliance students who are from the surrounding area, and they are very smart, ambitious. We're very proud to see them excel in school. And while they're there, they get 2 years worth of college credits while they're still going to high school. So I see a little bit of both. And I'm like the doctor here. I agree that there is still hope if we can just engage all of those youth and let them see that there is a reason to be positive, have hope, and move up in the world.
All right, thank you. Mr. White, give us some hope in the classroom.
What I see is I see a very talented black youth, technically advanced as far as technology, as far as computer savvy. I see malleable spirits that are able to do and rise and see potential and do things that we've never dreamed of. What I see is our youth are very smart, very perceptive, and they have realized that we've been lying to them, we've been deceiving them, we have not necessarily had their best interests in mind, and so a lot of times our generation, my generation, our parents told us, well, do this just because I told you. Well, the youth now, they can go on their Wi-Fi, their hotspot, and they can look it up and say, well, what you're telling me doesn't necessarily make sense. And so there's a lot of youth that are looking at us like, well, why should I believe you if you're not giving me a lot of accurate information? And so, because of social media, they have a lot of different ways that they can be influenced. Sexually, they're asking questions, and a lot of times we're not giving them that information, so they're exploring for themselves. When it comes down to just how they think things through and what they're trying to do as far as the classroom, hey, why should I learn math? Because I can go out and make millions playing basketball. And they can look up on their phone and see Dwayne Wade is making millions of dollars, and he's not doing math in the classroom. So I think that a lot of times we're looking at Generation X's children who are saying, we don't necessarily have to take what you're telling us at face value. And so if you want us to toe the line and do something a certain type of way, prove it to us.
All right.
All right, so, hi. What type of training did you receive that makes you qualified to work with the black youth of today? Mr.
Anyone,
White.
anyone.
Anyone, I guess.
Okay, I'll start. I think my first qualification is I was one. My second qualification is I have two. I think I should be qualified by now, but I'll keep going. My third qualification is I work with a whole bunch of them now. And I think one of the things that we have to understand in working with our youth is quite like, I'm sorry, I think it's Mr. White stated, is we need to understand our children are completely different than we are. And it goes beyond the do it because I told you so. That's one of the things. But even with the technology and everything else, they're a different breed. And I like to say I'm relatively young to be on the bench and I can relate to them. And every once in a while they say something, I go, huh? I didn't understand that. But I think being able to work with them, being one and having two, puts me in a position where I am able to sit down with them and relate to them and understand their perspective. And for me, we're sitting on the bench, how they got to where they are. And so that's why I think I'm qualified to work with these kids. The most important one is I love every one of them I see. And all of the kids, and they know in my courtroom, they know they're my babies. And I tell every parent, you have to share your kid with me, at least while they're on my docket.
Makes sense.
I would say I've had several thousand students as a teacher and as an administrator, and so I see a lot of different things. I have a K-12 program, and so I see preschool all the way up to high school, and I listen to my students. And one of the things that I've seen is they're telling us, they're screaming out to us, and they're yelling at us, they're shouting, "Hear me," and we're not listening. If you look into the audience, if you look into the classrooms, if you look in the church, and you see students that are disengaged, and they could care less, and they're waiting for the service or the class to be over so that they can get out and do whatever they want to do, then we're not hearing them. And so when you start opening up your ears and you start hearing what they have to say, they have a lot to say, and we can reach them at a different level. So part of my qualifications as far as what are my qualifications to deal with youth? That's part of 6 children raising, but actually listening to my children. Right now I have 500, and hearing what they have to say.
I'm going to date myself here. 42 years of listening to young people. At the age of 20, I became one of America's youngest college basketball coaches. And since that time, I've spent a life with these young people, and as the gentleman just said, listening to them. When you listen to them, you get the pathway to their souls. They actually give you the answers. And so my qualifications really is, I don't believe that God calls the qualified, he qualifies the called. And so I was called into this work. I would prefer to be on the college floor coaching the superstars, but I'm still coaching superstars. I don't like to lose, and I'm not losing. And so that's what qualifies me, that I understand that I can see beyond anything they're wearing and anything they're saying. I can see right into their souls and their hearts, and I understand that they all have a special purpose here in life, and so that qualifies me.
Your question I found was very interesting. You said, what was the training that qualified us? And I would say 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of med school, 3 years of residency, a year of chief residency, and 2 years of fellowship. There really wasn't much training to deal with African American youth. When you look at where education is for professionals, I don't think it looks at us as an important section or sector of the society. We look at how money is spent on research. For example, I believe sickle cell affects, I think, 3 times as many people in America than cystic fibrosis. You know, sickle cell happens to be more often in the black community, cystic fibrosis more often in the white community. But the amount of money spent on them, much more spent on cystic fibrosis and far fewer dollars spent on sickle cell. It's just an example of where we put our money, where we put our emphasis. It's not really on helping us be in the right position, with the right training, with the right tools to be able to help young black people. And so we have to rely upon having been one, or raising them, or actually just the experience with our population. Because if we wait for the training to come towards us, I don't think we have that, at least not yet.
I think what my experiences have been, I was a youth pastor for 15 years, and being a part of their experiences and trying to be relatable, trying to reach them where they are, and working in foster care for about a good 20 years. So I've heard a lot, seen a lot, but just being able to help and reach out. And I found out in all that time, in terms of what qualifies me, is that I came to the conclusion that we really don't have a youth problem. We have a parent problem.
Mr. Jones?
Similar to what Dr. White said, I took a lot of classes. I went to a lot of seminars, did a lot of internships, but there was nothing that prepared me to work with black youth, besides the fact that I was a black youth. I know what our communities are like. I know what our resources are like or not like. So those things I'm aware of, but even in the setting I'm in now, I'm around a lot of people who did not do internships in urban areas. They did not come from these areas, so they are now responsible for servicing our youth, and there is a breakdown. And so I often act as a bridge to help inform, correct, and educate, but it becomes difficult because this isn't something that you can always be taught. And there's not a lot of people who can just jump in, or they're not allowed. There are people, because again, my classes didn't prepare me for this. They allowed me to graduate. The preparation came with everything else as stated that God called me to do with youth here and other places, with my family, with my friends, but class itself, I cannot say it prepared me to work with youth because I did study gerontology, I studied mental health, I studied chemical, they do have a sector called child and family, but again, that doesn't necessarily teach you how to deal with a lot of the systemic problems that we find in our communities. So, personally, if I didn't grow up in this community, I don't know how.
Lastly.
I'm going to have to agree with the good doctor here, and also with Keith, that there is not enough training in my world, definitely, for dealing with black youth. And I know we all know that already, given the current social, political climate. What qualifies me to deal with black youth? I was a black youth. I grew up in Detroit. I'm a product of Detroit Public Schools, but I've received training in sexual assault, domestic violence, working with the autistic. Never as a police officer have I ever had training on dealing with black youth, and I believe that is because a lot of the leaders in our departments don't want to admit that some of their officers need training. I think that's something that needs to be focused on, needs to be suggested, especially by the citizens. I've seen too many officers in communities that clearly have bias, and, yes, some of us can watch each other, but, if we have an administration that's not going to do anything about it, then unfortunately, sometimes our comments fall on deaf ears. Excuse me. So that's my story.
All righty, moving on. When the children are away from the parents or caregivers, what sorts of high-risk behaviors are you noticing in your field?
I don't think there's a difference. I think that our kids are exhibiting what they do at home in the streets. They are a mirror of us. I think it's in Numbers in Leviticus, as dads and fathers and role models, they are suffering for our sins that we committed. And so I don't think there's any difference in most of the kids' behavior, those who aren't in trouble and those who stay in trouble. I think what you raise a kid to be at home, it shows up in the street and vice versa. And so the behaviors are just a mirror of that household or that family, the dynamics that go on in that household. If there's a lack of love and compassion, you see that in the street. There's a lack of love and compassion. So I think they're one and two of the same.
So I guess I'm going to expound a little bit more on that. Let's get a little bit more explicit just so that the audience can kind of identify what they look like. So not the generalization of it, but more, if we were to have pro-social behaviors, of course we have a supportive family network. So what does the high-risk behaviors explicitly look like?
What the doctor said is that they don't believe us, so there's not a trust. You see distrusting young people. You see young people who don't believe in their adults. You see young people who are angry and can't express that anger, but only through negative means. You see young people who are hungry and thirsty to be better people, but nobody has injected that into them. So you see people that are really acting with some minor to major mental health issues because they haven't had an intimate relationship with men and don't understand that. And number two, lack of love has been replaced with hate for themselves, and they definitely are devoid of spirituality. So you see people moving about the streets with no spiritual contacts or balance at all.
I see a lot of high-risk behavior, of course. There's a young man who stole a car on our campus, and he went to juvenile before we even finished our reports for that incident, because his mother basically said that he was locked up and for other charges that he had for crimes he had committed, and she just wanted me to get my paperwork through, get everything taken care of, so he could serve his time for this car theft as soon as possible, so he could get all this over with. Since then, I've heard that he's been in lockup again, and it's very heartbreaking. It's very sad. This young man trusts no one. He doesn't want to talk to us, which is understandable, but it just shows that at a young age, and he was 16 at the time, and I warned him, you're going to be 17 either this year or next year, I don't remember, but pretty soon you're going to be getting charged as an adult, and you're going to be going to prison. That's not a good thing. That's not a place you want to be. But he was very hardened to be so young that he wasn't hearing any of it, I could tell. One of his friends, I think I got through to a little bit when I talked to him about the possibility of going to college if he would start taking school seriously. But he and one of the other guys, they weren't even hearing it. And we see children coming on campus smelling like marijuana, and I'll always say something. There's nothing you can really do for someone who smells like marijuana, but I'll still say something. I say, that stuff affects your brain, right? So, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm like, well, first of all, you just walked past a police officer reeking of marijuana. I don't think that's fine. So drug use, larceny, stealing, that's the kind of high-risk behavior I see. And when they get caught, they get, their names in the system. We can pull up a name, and we can enter a name in the system in the computer, and everything they've done will pop up as far as reports taken with their name in it and all their associates. So we see a lot of high-risk behavior, unfortunately.
In community mental health, we see a lot of kids who exhibit a lot of anger. These kids are the kids who are suspended in school. They're verbally and physically aggressive in the classroom to adults, to peers. These are kids who are either victims of bullying or bullying themselves. We see high-risk behaviors of those young girls who have low self-esteem, those who want to medicate, and so they kind of dibble and dabble in all types of drugs, illegal, to help medicate. See a lot of kids who don't have coping skills, who can't deal with a lot of pressure, explosive, temper tantrums in children. We see a number of different things in just some of the symptoms of behaviors, and you see a lot of kids who are depressed, but they don't say anything. They're not reaching out, and as a result, one of the highest risk behaviors, and the number one killer I just found out and researched, was suicide, especially in Washington County. Suicide for young teens has increased within the last 2 years. I'm sure people have heard of, the 12-year-old girl who shot herself from Lincoln High School. And there was just another young boy in Marquette, 11 years old, who hung himself because someone put out that his 13-year-old girlfriend, she got killed. And it was a joke, and as a result, he hung himself. So we're seeing a lot of different at-risk behaviors, but a lot of symptoms that parents need to know about in terms of high-risk behaviors?
I would say I see a lot of what we don't want to talk about. Social norms. If you're watching Empire, and this may be hard to swallow, but a lot of the behavior that is glorified on that show is exhibited in my school. Homosexuality is exhibited on that show. It's exhibited in my school. Glorification and sensationalizing violent behavior, women fighting each other, men fighting each other, that's exhibited in the school. If you're looking at a lot of these shows and you're seeing, well, you know, alcohol, drugs, we're watching that, and our children are watching it, and then they bring it into the school, and we don't understand, well, what's going on. Now, I have the parents that, you know, I go and I talk to them, and they come into my office, and I have to leave my door open so I don't get a contact high. I mean, I get that, but I'm talking about the parents that are like, I have no idea why my child is acting this way. I go to church, and I'm a good person. Well, what is your child watching? Are they on YouTube? Are they on Facebook or whatever, and they're having conversations? And I'll take it one step further. The conversations that we are not having with our children, they're having with each other. I grew up in an era where we didn't talk about sex. That was a taboo. But I knew about it. I talked to my friends about it. Our children are finding out about these things, and we're not having these conversations. And so when we see some of the crimes, some of the behaviors, some of the what we consider unacceptable, if you're not having those conversations with your children, they're acceptable. If you're not doing something about it, then don't be surprised when it's happening. And if you've never sat down with your child to talk about sex, to talk about drugs, to talk about violent behavior, then they're learning that from somebody else.
I think it's really interesting, the question of what are they doing in front of their parents versus behind their parents, and I think you mentioned they're doing exactly the same thing. And I've witnessed much of that in the clinical setting. When we trained, you say if you have a teenager, it's no point asking them if they're using drugs, alcohol, cigarettes with their parents in the room, because they're going to fib to you, right? So you have to have the parents leave the room, and then you ask these probing questions. Of late, I have had kids discussing all of this in front of their parents, very openly, and nobody is shocked except me. So I've had to realize that, you know, as you mentioned quite clearly, and as was preached this morning by my husband, if you are regaling yourself, you and your child, with these things, it is changing you, it is changing them. I had a young lady in clinic not so long ago who had so many partners in the past 2 weeks that when she came back positive for an infection, I know we're in a mixed group here, so I'm trying to be careful about how I say it, there was no way of knowing who. And this is a conversation we had with the mum in the room. I think that speaks volumes for both the child and for the parent, and for, in that case, the grandchild that would soon result.
So I'm going to ask Judge Braxton to share a little further, right, with the high risk, but kind of make it a little more poignant dealing with criminal activity. What are we seeing?
I see everything. I see murderers. I see carjackers. I see armed robbers. I see people who steal from stores. I see people who steal from churches. There is no limit to what we can see in juvenile court. The only difference between juvenile court and the adult court is the age. the crimes don't change. It's kind of interesting as I was listening to everyone's statement. My approach is a little bit different as a juvenile judge. We do so much for our kids through the juvenile court system. We send them to awesome residential facilities. I go visit them all, so if I don't like one, they don't go there. But some of them are really great. They have really great services, and some of our colleagues are going to laugh, but it's true. I think as we focus on the black child, we have to focus on the community, not just the family, because I'm not going to date myself because I wasn't in that point in time when they would say the whole village raised the child, but I believe in that thought, that a whole village needs to raise a child. And I think what we see in our black community is that the village has stopped. And now we're focusing so much on why this child is the way that he or she is, and the reason they are the way he or she is because we've stopped being involved. I am old enough to know, and I'm not condoning spanking and everything else, because I can't say that as a judge, even though as a parent I may think differently. But I remember walking up and down the street and getting in trouble 12 times. And I would just pray my father wouldn't hear about it. And I got it from my mama too. Then I had to wait for my daddy, because the entire block knew about it, and the entire block could discipline me. And there was no police intervention, there was no CPS, there was no nothing. Nowadays, we have a group of people, and we do have limitations as parents and as neighbors, but we have a group of people, and I'm referring to the adults, and this is not going to be a popular view, that we have stepped back from our children. Some of us have gotten fancy letters behind our names, and we get to be called doctor, and I get to be called a doctor of the law, and we just get a little too good for our kids. And I was raised in the hoods of Cleveland, and I'm proud of it. I tell people that I became a single mother at 20. I don't say that because I'm proud of it. I am proud of what I've done to be where I am in spite of my circumstances. But I see all these kids, and they look like any kid that can sit in this room today, because these kids don't look a certain way. All these kids don't have bad parents. They're not all crackhead mamas and fathers that are in prison. I see kids that are murdering other people, and their fathers are businessmen, and their mothers are my colleagues. So the way this kid looks, a high-risk kid doesn't have a look, because it can be your kid. No matter what you instill in that child, it is only by the grace of God that your child turns out the way you want them to be. It's not you. It's not me. So when we look at the state of our black child, we have to look at the state of our community. Are we too good to come down to where they are, or where we think they are, and offer them something else? That's what we have to be willing to do as a community to change what our child looks like. Because while I have 2, and I have the responsibility of 750 on my docket, every kid in here is my responsibility too. And until our community feels that way, this discussion will continue to happen. We will be at different churches at different times, and we will be in the same position. And I tell people, get off your high horse. My kids don't call me Judge. They call me Miss B. Some of them call me Miss Karen, and I'm okay with that because I know my title. I don't need you to call me that. But they need to know I'm willing to come right where you are. I got a girl right now, I told her I'm going to meet you in a strip club. You're going to be real nervous when I show up. But I'm going to meet her there because I need her out of there. And I can't say I want you out from my cushioned chambers with my black robe on where everybody listens to what I say. But I'm going to put on a real cute outfit, pay for a dance, and bring her over next to me. If we can't get there, we don't need this discussion. The state of our black child starts in rooms like this. And if you think that you are better because you have degrees and all these other things and your child is not going to turn out that way, Just wait. And if they don't, say, thank you, Jesus, praise the Lord.
All right, all right. All right, so we're going to move on. Many of you had seen the flyer, some of you did not, but on the flyer it had quite a bit of data, right, that was looking at single-parent households. It was looking at drug use. It was looking at school systems. Just because of the interest of time, and I want our audience to be able to kind of ask some questions as well, I'm going to kind of jump ahead. So, knowing that we're dealing with a lot within our community, and our young people are dealing with a lot, one big issue of today is looking at zero tolerance policies within the school system. With those policies, they state that they rely very heavily, right, on them for exclusionary purposes. So my question is, looking at the fact that African American children are disproportionately affected by this, do you believe that this Michigan law should be upheld or done away with? And then I'm going to add to that, should we look at having an all-black institution to raise and to teach our children, or should we keep them integrated? Whatever your answer is, please support your answer with your argument. Thank you. Starting with Ms. Judy.
I was going to pass that question.
Well, you can pass. You can pass.
And leave it to the educators.
Okay, you can pass. You can pass. We can start on the other end. Mr. White.
I've been in education for about 20 years, and currently we have 3 charter schools in Inkster, West Lane area, mostly about 90% Inkster students. And if you don't know what happened in Inkster, the entire Inkster school district was dissolved. What you don't know is it was a conspiracy by the government to get the land. After they dissolved the schools, the school system, they tore down the land, and they quitclaimed it for $1 to the surrounding school systems so that they could, do whatever they wanted to do. We actually had some conversations with Wayne Westland, Romulus, talked to the Romulus superintendent. We had a buyer to buy Inkster High School, and the Romulus superintendent at the time, she's now retired, said that she would never allow us to purchase the Inkster School High School because they would lose about $2 million. And so there's a lot of policies, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of things going on. With the zero tolerance, we have students coming to our school from Taylor School System, Wayne Westland, and what they do is, if you have a white student and you have a black student and they do the same thing, the zero tolerance will weigh heavily on that black student and they'll be put out. That's just the reality of it. So when we say zero tolerance, if it was fair across the board, I'd be all for it. But it's not. And since it's not, I don't believe that it should be supported because, unfortunately, a lot of times we're not aware of what's going on with legislation. A lot of times legislation is put into the law books and we don't even know what's going on. And so when we vote on certain things, we don't understand that there is an underlying conspiracy to either destroy a school district, destroy people. Right now, if you look at it, a lot of our inner city urban school districts, they have limited funding. And when I say limited funding, there's a lot. The school districts are supported by per pupil allocation. So like my school, we're a charter school, but we get public funds. And so I get about $7,500 per student. And then we get some at-risk because we're in the at-risk population. But if you're in Farmington Hills, if you're in Auburn Hills, you get a millage. And if your house is worth a lot of money, you get a lot of money that goes into the school. And so the difference between that educational process of an urban school district that has limited resources and a suburban school district that has iPads and whiteboards and smartboards and all these types of things, and 1 to 15 student-teacher ratio, as opposed to some DPS schools that has a 1 to 45, there's a difference. And so that's why I would not support a zero tolerance.
Anyone else have anything to add to that, or we'll move on to the next? Moving on? All right, so since we're looking at the expulsion and suspension rates, data shows that school suspension is the top predictor for those students incarcerated by 9th grade. As of 2013, research showed that black juveniles were more than 4 times as likely to be committed to a secure placement as white juveniles. Why is there such a large disparity with incarceration of black youth in this day? I'm going to start with Judge B. I'm going to move it on over to Keith and Mr. Bennett. Oh, yeah. We got our police officer. Oh, yeah, we got to get down on this one. I need to know why our babies are.
I was saving all my answers for the audience questions.
Come on with it. Let's do this.
Why are they incarcerated? I'm going to tread lightly on this one, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm not backing out of this answer, but I am a sitting judge, and
We respect that.
I have to tread lightly on some comments that I make, but for they make it back to my chief, and I no longer be sitting by the end of this week. I'm sorry? Oh, you ain't gonna pay me when I don't have a job, though, but I appreciate that. And let me give this one disclaimer. Every courtroom is different. And so I challenge you to come to my courtroom on any given day, that's in Wayne County, by the way, and see how I do my cases. Generally, there's a lot of things that I think go into that. One, minorities don't have the representation. Most non-minorities come in with heavy-hitting attorneys. The attorneys may or may not know a judge, not me, but maybe they know somebody else. There's a lot of deals that are made on a golf course. They don't just do business on the golf courses. They do a lot of things on golf courses. There's a lot of deals that are made prior to walking into a courtroom. Number two, non-minorities have more support because generally the ones that I see have more access to resources. And so when you're looking at placing, let's say, a white child, the mom may jump up and say, well, I know a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, a counselor, a this, a that. I've already set it up. I've already paid for it. I don't need your Medicaid. I don't need the court dollars. I don't need this. I don't need that. Let me try this. Sometimes when I ask a black parent, well, what can you do if I leave them out? I don't know. Well, now you don't really leave me with a lot of options anymore. I guess the answer that most people are wanting to hear is some of the judges look at black kids and white kids differently. And sometimes that is, in fact, the case. My position with placing black children, it really just depends on their circumstances and if I think placement can help them more than it can hurt them. Sometimes taking them out of their environment is a benefit if their environment is so negative. And if I can show them something different and show them a way out, then maybe once they go back, it's a little different. But generally, there's a lot of different reasons why our kids are placed at different rates. My bigger concern is, why are they arrested at different rates? Because it's not so much what happens in the courtroom, it's what happens before they get to a courtroom. And I have nothing to do with that part. So now I'll put down my mic.
Thank you. All right. Officer Elliott.
Okay, wow. I don't even know where to start. Well, first of all, you know, I've only worked in the city of Ypsilanti, and mostly on a college campus. But most of who we see, you know, driving around there are some white professionals driving through that work on the campus, and we do see a lot of not necessarily black youth driving, but there are some. And I have to say that, well, first I'm going to tell you a little joke between me and my brother. We're younger. If you notice, I'm a little light-skinned. And so is he. And it's not really funny, but we would joke that, you know, we're driving through wherever at night, and the police are going by. All they see is a flash of light driving by, and they don't bother with us. But there is profiling, and that was what we were talking about was, you know, there is absolutely profiling. I don't care what anybody tells you or tells me. So working in Ypsilanti, I'm also, you know, amongst a certain amount of poverty in some of the neighborhoods. And when you profile, you look for that impoverished child, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and you know that person driving that shabby car, whatever the case may be, might be poor, might have been profiled before, might have gotten a ticket for one thing or the other, and then might have a warrant or a suspended license. And so therefore you go after that person looking for an arrest. And as the judge mentioned, white kids do the same things. Some of them, whether they're poor or whether they just feel they don't have to pay, they don't have to be accountable. But they have good lawyers. They don't have to have public defenders. Nothing against public defenders, but they just don't seem to have the resources that some of these more expensive, fancier attorneys have to get them these pleas. So, you know, I can tell you straight up that, yes, there are more black youth incarcerated because they're getting all the attention. And sometimes they do get into trouble that some of the rich white kids don't get into, because the rich white kids aren't forced to think about how their younger brothers and sisters are going to get clothes, food, etc. When you're talking about impoverished neighborhoods. So there's so many reasons, and I've just mentioned a couple here. But like I said, didn't know where to start, don't know where to finish, but there's a lot of unfairness that goes around that I've seen.
Personally, from a social work standpoint, I think a lot of the reason we see a lot of our black males incarcerated, especially as youth, prevention, there's a problem. And for those who get in trouble, aftercare. Those are major components for their success and major components that are missing in our community. I've worked with young men who have been released, and just like an adult, getting a job, finding a church home, finding a group to be connected to have been very problematic. But again, going back to piggyback on what everyone else has said, what landed them there to begin with. In Ann Arbor, if you get caught with a certain amount of marijuana, you might be cited. There's not a major penalty. You go to Detroit, there's different rules. You come back to this area, they didn't have as many school closings in Washington. Detroit, like 30, 25. The area is impoverished. There are not a lot of resources. So when some of these young men start getting in trouble, what I start noticing is that people start viewing them as I talk to these guys about, we have a name for it, we call them throwaways. They become a throwaway. When your name gets listed so many times in the system, you become a throwaway. So we can't wait till your 18th birthday. Because 17, you're right. You're right. Because I've had people already, I worked with the juvenile system and I moved up to the adults, and already I've had guys call me across the yard, Mr. Jones. And I'm like, why are you here? You went through the program. Why are you here? When I got out, I had to go back to doing what I do. So I'm seeing a lot of pieces missing as far as rehabilitation, mentally, socially, emotionally, spiritually. They're not getting that. And this wasn't just once they became incarcerated or got in trouble. This wasn't happening throughout. So again, it goes back to where's the community? Where's the village?
Why did you ask this question? And I'm sitting in church. Anybody from the Department of Corrections here? I am in a major feud with the Department of Corrections. For years, I partnered with them under a lot of programs, MPRI, which was Michigan Prison Reentry Initiative. At one point in time, our corrections budget was and it still is, the largest line item on the state budget. And doing work with parolees for probably I'm dating myself every time I open my mouth up, 24 years, I got tired of that work on the other end. And so I devised a strategy with Wayne County's Third Circuit Court. Back in 2008, we were meeting secretly at my place in the evening sometimes. Some of the judges are still there, to come up with a diversionary program that will keep our young men and women out, specifically our young men, out of prison. Let me share this with you about Wayne County's Third Circuit Court. No, it's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. Some of the most unique, creative judges I've ever seen in my life. And I share with our guys, because I see most of the probationers that are in the community. They're not your enemy. They're tired of this as much as you're tired of this, but they have a job to do. And so what they have done with us is partner under a prison diversionary program that saves the state up front $6.5 million. And they give us $1.5 million to serve the largest amount of probation, 16 to 39. But they argue about that money every year, and they try to take it. It was on the front page of Detroit News just 2 weeks ago, where they were slamming me, slamming my program and everything. But they distorted everything, which they do. Again, I go back to tell you I have a degree in corrections administration. So my goal after I got out of college coaching was to go inside of prisons and coach from there. But when I did my internship, everything that I expressed that I would do inside of a prison, they told me, you won't do that here. No, you can't do that. You don't mention the 4-letter word love in here. You don't do any of that. And so I said, well, I got to go back outside and do what I got to do. And so that's a big business. You got to understand that. And while some lawmakers are calling for a reduced corrections budget, you're talking about taking some folks' jobs that's up north and all those other places who have relied on that for year after year after year after year, family generations. And so they're feuding with me now, but thank God I am a child of God, and the truth will set you free. Amen. All right. Second thing is I'm close enough to retirement, I got to say what I got to say. And I can't help our young men if I don't tell them this is a business. You're walking into a slave market if you keep falling for this. And so diversionary is not a process that the Department of Corrections really adopts. They don't want to go out of business. They're in business to make money, keep jobs, benefits. And so his folk over at the reentry center don't like me. I've been going in prisons for 20-something years. All of a sudden, the last 6 months, I'm not allowed inside anymore. So we got to understand that we have to teach our young people that they are so valuable that somebody thinks they're worth locking them up. But I think they're worth keeping them out.
All righty, now we're going to move.
Larry, I just want to mention, you said, why are so many of our young people incarcerated? And I think that so many of our young people are incarcerated because our society wants it to be just that way. We set things up so that we have a wonderful pram to prison pipeline, and it works beautifully. And when it isn't working, we shift the goalposts to make sure that it works. I know that sounds a little radical, but one of the things that has been concerning me recently, as I was mentioning to you the other day, is that you've all heard about the opioid epidemic, have you not? This is going to make me lose my lunch. All of a sudden, we have realized that drugs are a significant problem destroying small towns around America. And those people who are using the drugs, Lord bless them. They are not criminals. They are ill. We need to cure them. We need to put them in rehab. We need to help them. It so happens that the people who are mostly impacted by this particular epidemic are the majority. When for years we have had black communities brought down by the use of drugs, those young people were criminals. Let's lock them up. At work, we have many a meeting now about what we can do about this opioid epidemic. What NIH grant can we write to help these just hurting people? And don't get me wrong, because we are in church. I do believe they're hurting, and I really do believe that doctors have played a role in getting us there to some extent. And so I do believe that we should help them. I just want to help every young person who is having a difficulty with drugs, and not criminalize it, but treat it as it should be treated.
That was a good question right there. All right. A 2015 study by the CDC found that for the first time, the suicide rate of black children between the ages of 5 and 11 had doubled between 1993 and 2013, while the rate among white children had declined. Suicides by hanging nearly tripled among black boys in particular. Suicide has become the third leading cause of death among black people between the ages of 15 and 24. Why do you think that our children are at a point of not wanting to live anymore when we have been known to survive almost anything? We are resilient people. What do you believe is the catalyst?
We're going to start with Ms. Thurman.
Wow, so many different factors, I believe.
Mike.
I'm sorry. So many factors. As I saw in the mental health community, coping skills is a big, big issue. We have so many kids who are not resilient. The African American community has always been known for its strength. The black family has always been known for its strength. But they don't see that anymore. I think so many people are dealing with so many crises. They're not able to handle them. Young people, pretty much for the most part, you know, the interaction has kind of dwindled. We used to talk to folk on the phone, and now young people, they just text each other or they Instagram, and do all the things. So I think the social interaction has diminished among young people. Young people don't feel that they can reach out and talk to anybody. A lot of times peers have more power in terms of influence than parents, and so they listen to a lot of their peers. And bullying has become such a big issue. The cyberbullying, and a lot of kids kind of, are falling, to the wayside in terms of just dealing, being able to do that. The lack of self-esteem are all contributing factors to that.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
I know we have a community of young people who are walking around in trauma, and they don't understand that. My young men, I often ask them, very often, or all the time, really, how many have lost a brother? And if I got 75 in the room, 30 raised their hand. How many have lost a cousin? Then the other hands go up. How many have lost a dad? Then the more hands go. How many have lost multiple hands? Then they put both hands up. Who's dealing with that loss when they've been walking by dead bodies constantly, seeing gunshot victims constantly? And so they're in trauma. And when you don't address trauma, the way out sometimes is to get out. Some of our guys commit crimes trying to get shot and hurt and killed. That's why they go up and are aggressive with law enforcement. Help me out of this situation. I'm in pain, I'm in trauma. And so I think trauma is one of the things that is really pushing the suicide. And we don't have just young people in trauma, we got families in trauma.
I was going to say something similar. Those who know just a little bit about suicide or have studied it know that most people, as I said, most people who commit suicide actually don't want to die. They want the pain to stop. So when you're in pain and it's not being addressed and you want that pain to stop, that becomes the ultimate out. And one of the reasons that young people and old people like are living in so much pain is that I think there is a disconnect from family and others, but also a disconnect from God. I think without believing that there's something greater to live for or something divinely pushing you to get up every day, because everyone gets hit at some point with something that lays you flat. But there has to be something that's instilled internally or deeper than you to get you up some days. And without that connection to God, then it does leave a lot of people feeling just eternally hopeless.
I think our mental health services have changed dramatically over the years. It was decided that we really shouldn't have the services that we have, that it wasn't needed, and we just threw people out on the streets, and there you have it. So it's really quite hard to get young people in touch with the mental health services that they need. And I think that's part of why we're seeing the results that we are. I think it's important that we do what we can to change that. I will have to say that my final word on that would have to be a complete agreement with Keith, because I couldn't go home after this if I didn't say what Darren would want me to say, which is true. That also it is, and the bottom line to all of this is that connection with God that doesn't exist as much in our community, it appears, as it once did. But I have to say, I see that coming up more in clinic than I ever have in the past, actually. A concern about that from parents and about their children. Up to this week, I had a mum all but in tears because of this very, very issue. And so I think while we try and deal with all of the social issues that we need to, if we could just get back to that faith, it would help our communities, our families, and our young people.
I'd have to say also, I agree with that. I think historically, I'm a little older than I look. In my parents' generation, black communities, first of all, with segregation, we had our successful and, the doctors and the lawyers and the whoever were also living in the same neighborhoods as the blue-collar workers and whatever. So our youth had someone to look up to, someone that looked like them, to say, hey, I can do this one day. And the church was the center of all that. One thing that we have a history of where we've fallen short is that we have such a reputation. We believe so much that we're supposed to be strong and self-sufficient. We used to depend on God. Now we don't depend on anybody. We don't seek mental health services because black folks don't do that. When I was growing up in Detroit, as somebody mentioned going to having a therapist, they were like, oh, you crazy, whereas, and I live in Ann Arbor, with white people, upper class people, having a therapist is just every day, having an accountant or a lawyer or whatever. So their kids have someone to talk to, and ours don't. And sometimes they don't have mom and dad available. Even if mom and dad are successful, sometimes they're busy and don't have time. And the kids are being raised on the streets. I don't care if you live in Bloomfield Hills. If you're not there for whatever reason. And I wanted to go back to one quick thing about the opioid epidemic. Among police officers, the training has exploded on using Narcan, the stuff for drug overdoses. And you think back to, many of our great performers in the past who've had heroin addictions and things like that. So that's been going on for years back. And suddenly now that it's a problem of the wealthy, then we've got police officers running around all over the place with Narcan looking to save people, and they're getting awards for it. And, before it was just like, oh, yeah, there's another one dead. He probably overdosed. Where now, they're looking to save people, these poor people, as the doctor said.
All right. So we have identified a lot today. And I want each one of you to briefly share. What do you think the big pink elephant in the room really is? What is really the cause for the demise of our young black youth today? Who did it? Is it the home? Is it the school? Is it the church? Is it the community at large? Who do you really think is the blame? Starting with Mr. White.
Me, for real? I think we all are to blame. Look around. Where are youth? In our church. They're not here. That's a problem. Why aren't we going out into the streets to preach the gospel? I don't understand preaching the gospel to all the world, but we're not going house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood, and getting our youth to come to church. I blame us. I think that a lot of times we're cowards and that this may be hard, but we don't want to step on toes. We don't want to upset people by saying our youth want to come to church and they do want to worship, but we're going to offend somebody if we play the drums too hard. That's a problem. And so we won't do the things that the youth will need, and so they find something else. We're too busy trying to make money, support our families, and so we're not providing safe activities. Saturday night, I worked all week, and so I'm tired, and figure it out on your own. Or let somebody else figure it out. We have our CFL, but what if I have girls? They don't care about basketball. I care about basketball. They don't. But are we providing skating activities, bowling, something like that? We're the blame. And if we don't do, and we've had these conversations. I grew up with Cleo, Mark, Terry Perry. Grew up in the church. We've had these conversations. I went to Eastern with Leah. We've had these conversations. And we're just going to keep having the same old conversation again and again and again until we make a stand and say enough is enough. We're going to put our foot down, and we're going to do something different that is going to be uncomfortable for the masses and save our youth.
Wow. I'm kind of torn between two pink elephants. Number one is, as I said, we used to all live in the same communities and support one another, and I believe we've abandoned one another. Those who make it just get out, don't associate with the inner city anymore, don't associate with where they come from anymore. I'm a big admirer of my parents' generation, which, I mean, my dad fought in Korea. They both lived through the Depression. And people, stood up for each other. My grandmother lost her husband when my dad was 4 years old, and he was the oldest. And there was no welfare then. There was no, whatever they call it now, bridge or, and she still made it. She depended on family, neighbors, her hard work. But we don't really have that anymore. We can't always drop the kids off with grandma or who's got some land in Kentucky or the, family, neighbors, etc. But my other pink elephant is that I never used to understand institutionalized racism. Didn't know much about it. I was not privileged, but I thought I was because I had good parents and they took care of me and they taught me well. But, and I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, so I just wasn't exposed to that much. But, the older I've gotten, I see that institutionalized racism is very real. We have a lot of people, including people I've worked with, every time a black person makes a comment about some sort of racism that is happening, they say, I knew they would just play the race card. And this person brings up the race card so much, I think that, he's definitely got an issue with race. I think he brings up the race card more than anybody. But I still believe that, I do believe that institutionalized racism has a lot to do with it failing the youth because they're set up to fail from day one. Like I mentioned, looking for people who've probably got warrants because they look like they can't pay their tickets or didn't have transportation to court when they had a court date, didn't get their notices in the mail. Maybe they don't even have a place to live to get their notices in the mail. I just think the system is set up to fail youth right now. And they don't have that extended family called the neighborhood to look out for them, to help them out that way.
So I guess what I think is the reason for the difficulties that our young black youth experience, I guess I shouldn't admit that I know this television show, but decades ago, Saturday Night Live used to say, had a skit about Satan, maybe? I think it's the devil. I think it's the devil. He has ensured that those who are racist will get to act out their racist behaviors and thoughts and preferences. Those of us who are the brunt of the racism will get hatred and will live in that, and that will allow us to be less effective than we ought to be. Those who can be caused to be too busy will be too busy to care and to be able to help. Those who are selfish and self-centered will try to work to their own good and the good of their family and not for the good of community, of the society at large. I think he does everything he can to really keep this status quo going because keeps us away from being able to achieve all that God wants us to achieve and to be all that God wants us to be. But when we know the real source of the problem, it actually allows us to see the solution. And we all have access to that solution.
Wow. Bible teaches that where there's no vision, the people shall perish. And so we've lost our vision, so it's our issue. We have abandoned the very power that gives us our purpose, and that's God. About 4 years ago, I had a friend of mine who's from Baltimore, and his name is Dr. Frank Reed. He's a prominent minister in Baltimore, Maryland. And so we were driving through Detroit, and he said, I want you to take me around. I haven't been here in a while. He was just shocked at what he saw. And then he asked me a question. He said, Brother Keith, what would you say is the percentage of people in Detroit? Because Detroit had a lot of churches. You were known for just great ministers, and he went on to name a few. What was the percentage of people who are in the church now opposed to then? And I did just what I just did. I laughed. I said, well, back when you were talking, probably on any given week, 73 to 78% of our community would touch base with a church. Whether it was through your immediate family or extended family, you were going to touch base with that church at some point. I said, I would gather to say if it's 50% now. And he said, wow. And so that's where I think that's the pink elephant. We turned our backs on the very power that brought us to where we got to where we are. We have no vision for our people anymore. Other people have a vision for us. And then when we made it, because when we were poor, we all stuck together. Right. When we became a little bit better than poor, because we never had much. We don't have much now. Right. What we did is start mimicking them, adopting their philosophies, letting our kids misbehave, negotiating with our kids. There wasn't no negotiation, not just in my home. It wasn't any in my community. And I was raised as a singer. I didn't meet my dad until I was 35. And so I'm blessed, as I heard somebody say today, to have 3 two-step kids. And my youngest son, biologically, was 26, that turned out awesome. But I raised them in the same way my great-grandmother and great-grandmother and grandmother did. They were raised understanding God, the church, and there's no negotiation. You don't know what you don't know, so I'm going to tell you until you know. We can't even tell our kids to turn video games or TVs off. So how are we going to tell them don't do drugs and sex? And so we got to go back to go to where we need to go. If we got a promised land, we got to go back and touch base with the pink elephants that we abandoned God. He hasn't abandoned us. We abandoned him.
Oh, what has led us here? The community at large, I'm going to go with that as one of the options you listed, and I would love to go through everything, but for the sake of time, I won't rehash what has already been said, but we have all this information. What do we do with it? We continue to meet, but what do we do after the meeting? We talk about it, and we talk about it. And we vote about talking about it some more. At some point, something has to be done. I would be a liar if I said that, because I came from, I wasn't incarcerated. Back then it felt like incarceration. I went to a boarding school. I went to a boarding school in the middle of Pine Forge, Pennsylvania. It was an all-black boarding school. But we had some of the best people that instilled in us some things that propelled us to go forward and do something greater than what, like you said, at that age, I didn't have a full vision of what I wanted to do. In fact, I remember telling, she's one of my most favorite teachers ever. When I told her what I wanted to be She's like, you're going to college next year. What do you want to do? I said, physical, no, I think I told her radiology or something. She's like, no, you're not going to do that. I said, physical therapy? She's like, no, you're not doing that either. And I'm like, well, these are things that I'm thinking that are going to benefit, like, these are excellent careers. But someone to say, these are your skills, this is what you're good at, let me help you. And she was the first person. I had never written a script. I had never had a video camera in my hand. She stuck a video camera in my hand and said, I want a PSA, a public service announcement, and I need it Friday. But someone to push me to do something greater than what I had experienced. Our kids aren't getting that anymore. Again, many of them are looked at as being in the way. Troublemakers, and as I said before, throwaways. So if they can't at home, if you're in the way at home, you're in the way at church, and you're in the way at school, what do? Where do you go? I've said this when I preached here. There's always somebody willing to take your child. I promise you. I promise you, the weed man loves your kid. He loves them, and he's going to tell them more than you, because he's going to get your child to do things that you know he shouldn't be doing. The guy that wants to traffic your child, he loves your child too, because he has a plan for them. So if we don't start to come together as a community and start to motivate our kids and put them on a path, we're going to continue to see this. They're looking for guidance. That's the funny thing. They want it. But again, because we have certain amenities and certain things that we have in our life, we're too busy for that. We don't have time to fix this. Once upon a time, I remember when my school needed things, we didn't wait for the city to come fix it. Dad showed up. They painted the walls. They fixed the doors. They covered up the holes. Whatever that school needed, they did it. They showed up with us. But that community is not there, or it seems to be missing. So, if these people who are called by his name would humble themselves and pray and get back together, we're gonna see some things move. We will. We're gonna see some things move.
I'm not going to try to come behind that sermon. So I'm gonna flip it a little bit. No disrespect to our wonderful hosts. These esteemed panelists, I think, have put it best. It's all of the above. So I want to challenge everybody here, because I work with a disenfranchised group of kids on a regular basis, and a disenfranchised families on a regular basis. And so instead of talking about it, I'm like Nike. I say, let's just do it. Because if after here we just talk about it, you go home and talk about it, you put it on Facebook, we talk about it, and like you said, we just still talking. So let's do something. So in our court in Wayne County, and unfortunately I'm Wayne County, I know this is Washtenaw County, but we take Washtenaw County folks too. We just want some black families. In our court, we have tons of children who have nowhere to go for one reason or another. And it's not my place to place blame on the parents. I probably have done that at some point in time, which is why they don't have their children. So let's move on. We are in need of foster parents for our black children. The churches are complaining that our black children are being placed in homosexual homes, but the churches are not giving us any families to put our kids with. The homosexual families are coming forward, and let me just be real clear again. As a sitting judge, I take no position on homosexuality. I will say, however, I am the child of a Baptist pastor. You take with that what you will. We also have tons of kids who are adjudicated, which means they have committed crimes in the past, and we've put a label on them, and they don't have anywhere to go either. We need SIL placements, semi-independent living homes for those children. So if you want to make a difference and talk about what the community should be doing for our kids, here are some opportunities to do it. I got Bible bookmarks for the holy people. I got some business cards for the rest of y'all. If you want to make a difference and stop sitting here and talking about it, and you want to be about it, and not talk about how busy we are, how we moved on up to Ann Arbor instead of Ypsilanti. If you want to bring a kid and show them that black folks can live in Ann Arbor, then take them in your house, because we need you. We don't need you tomorrow. I got, 60 kids on my docket right now. If I get some volunteers and we can get a clearance, you can get a kid in about 2 weeks, because we got to do the background checks and everything else. So if we're all serious about the state of our black child or of our black children, then let's step up and do something for these disenfranchised children, these children that don't have hope, these children that don't have the community around them. Let's do something about it. And let's be a community around these children when their families can't be. So if you're interested, by all means, talk to me after this program. Thank you.
There's no more really that can be said. After the panel has said it all, I probably would wrap it up in this sentence. Am I my brother's keeper? And I remember seeing it on, and I can remember Wesley Snipes, New Jack City. And what was his name? Money something said, am I my brother's, G Money, am I my brother's keeper? You know, we have got to get back to caring about each other. And I believe one of the greatest moments that we've allowed to pass down through history is sitting down at the table. We used to come, Mama cook, we'd be at the table, everybody sitting down, eating together, and talking about what went on, how was your day, what's going on. There's all types of mentoring programs, and we didn't have quote-unquote mentoring programs back in the day. Grandmama said, look, this is what you do, what Mama did that, and you passed it down through generations. And so but everything started at the church, and I think the church has to be more accessible than what we are. We can't be afraid to deal with children, and you gotta be able to be flexible in meeting with the youth and their needs. If they want to do some things that are creative, allow them, because they need authentic, genuine relationships with God. And a lot of times they don't want to come to church because they see how you act at home. They don't want to see, you talk about one thing, but you're different at home. And so mentoring is important, but us caring about each other. Begin to it's simple. Calling folk up on the phone, baby, how you doing? You see somebody who needs some help in tutoring. Those simple things. A lot of times we do things when crisis come. And then after Hurricane Katrina, folks don't make money. You don't hear anything about that. We can't wait for the crisis. The crisis has already hit us. But it's about going out one-on-one, each one reaching one, and being our brother's keeper.
All right. I think our panelists have done an excellent job in displaying what the state of our black youth is today. But right now I have a young man that's just as near and dear to my heart. Come on up, Lamar. And I want you all to be able to hear what exactly our young people are dealing with, because it's coming from the mouth, right, of the young person. Lamar was like, I don't really know what I'm going to say. You might have to ask me a couple of questions. But Lamar, I just kind of want you to share briefly what led you to being incarcerated, and how have you been able to kind of stay out of the system after you served your time?
How everybody doing? What led me to getting arrested is like the attention from my family. Like my mama, she was so focused on too low. Oh, she was so focused on like her boyfriend, because she didn't get the love that she got from her family. So that drove me to the streets. Like that drove me to go mess with my friends. I see they like money, so I like money, so I want to go out and get it. But it's a lot of focus like on the internet and social media, all that. Like, everybody like see the rappers, they posting money. Okay, they in the NBA. All right, they think that that's the easiest way to out, so they try to get it. All it is just like Facebook. All that is influence their mind to get them to think that everything is all right. That's what's on, like the internet and all that. That's really it.
So Lamar, share with the panelists and the audience as well, what could the community had done more for you back then and even now? What can we do more to help young men like yourself?
That's a hard question.
And be honest.
I say resources because like everybody got an idea, and then some people need money for the idea. If they had resources to build their idea, they wouldn't go back to the streets and try to get them.
And so is there anything that you desire today? Because we're all here in support of our young people. Definitely in support of you. That's why I asked you to come.
Yeah.
So what is your current state? We're talking about the state of the black youth. What is your current state right now? How are you able to still remain out of the system? Is it God? Is it, the fact that you have people surround? What is it that's giving you the strength to remain out? How long have you been out from Lincoln?
For 2 years.
2 years now. And that's good because typically, what's our recidivism rates looking like? He was, okay. Committed as a juvenile. Yes, definitely.
I think that it's because I deal with my problems, like, on my own, and don't ask, like, my parents or nobody, because I know that I can't change what happened, so I just deal with it, and if I want what's best for me, then I'm going to just do what's right.
All right. Sure.
Since we're talking about incarcerated youth, and you were in Lincoln, which is a secure facility where some of our youth are placed for committing certain crimes, was there any benefit to you in going into a facility like Lincoln?
The first time I got arrested, I took it as a joke. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm about to get out. It didn't really faze me. That's because I was just thinking at a young mind state. But as I gathered, she been helping me, like, focusing. It's really, like, the time I know that I wasted, like, my whole 15, 16, 14, all them years I can't get back. So it's like, why get incarcerated again and then waste some more years?
Can I ask you a question as well? Did you get as much attention before incarceration as you getting now?
Not really. It's still the same way. That's why I give myself attention.
Okay. Do you feel like you still need some people outside of Leah in your life now?
Of course, or I'd be lonely.
Okay. All right, good.
But, Mr. Bennett, kind of elaborate on what you kind of, getting him to see.
Iron sharpens iron. And unfortunately, what I did with my boys is, and it trips out young men your age, and I share with them that as soon as they could stand up on their own, I took showers with them every night. Because I wanted them to have that intimate relationship with me as a dad. But also, who better to tell you how to groom yourself and clean yourself? And we've left that too often to our moms, as you said, and women. And so for you to keep progressing through life, the community owes you to come into your life as men along the way. Not one person, but a series of men to take you from step by step, to show you how. And so I think a lot of young men don't believe that's present in the community or is important. I didn't have my dad until I didn't meet him until I was 35. I didn't think I missed him. It wasn't until I became a dad when I was like, whoa, I missed all of this. And so that's what I'm trying to get you to understand, is that the more positive men you have in your life to help you along this journey is going to help you. So never be afraid to find those guys and tell them that. And forget mentoring, they owe you that.
Right. All right, thanks.
All right, thank you, Lamar. Right. So we're going to open it up. You did a great job, great job. We're going to open it up for the audience. For Q&A, we're going to give it probably, well, it all depends on the level of questioning that comes. But right now, we're going to open it up for the audience. If you have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists, please feel free. We have the mic centered in the middle of the pews there. You can come on up. I have one gentleman
Excuse
here.
me.
You can
Miss Josephine called me and told me to come here today. I've been working here for a while. That gentleman right there, this is the reason why I do this. Because I realize that you have to be a former knucklehead to reach the knuckleheads. I honor everything that y'all doing. It takes a lot of attention for this. But me, myself, I feel like guys like me, we owe the community. You know, they tell you that when you're incarcerated, you come home, you paid your debt to society. That's not true. Because you didn't tear society up. You tore your neighborhood up. So you had to come home and be, an asset to your liability. Y'all don't look at it, you know what I'm saying? But I spent over 22 years in prison. My first murder, I probably was 13 years old. I was one of the leaders of the Earl Flynn's. Okay? I've been a terrible, terrible youth. I probably one of the worst youth you've ever saw. I was the only kid that was in junior high school that had to have a police escort home. Home. From school. Who does that? You go to school to learn. So, my last 9 years of prison, I started an organization called the PAT Awareness Committee. They called it not MRR. That's what they called it. But I wrote it in 1984. I wrote it in prison. And it was a program because we didn't like the way pre-release program was running. Pre-release was set up for failure. Yes, it is. And I watched guys, dress guys out, go home year after year, they come right back in 3 months. The whole summer they back. Oh man, I didn't know what to do. So as a committee, I got together all the other prisons and all the other guys. I said, look, we're going to put together a committee. We're going to go to the PO, we're going to go to the warden, we're going to go to the deputy warden, we're going to tell them how we want to run a program. It took me 2 years to get it running. 5 years after it was running, when I go to parole board for the 5th time, they tell me, oh, you should get in parole awareness committee. You should take the course up. I said, really? So I went out, got my file, and I showed them, I said, look, I founded it. They were shocked. So they turned it to MRI. Nothing like I imagined it to be. I have nothing against it. I just don't work with it no more, right? My thing is this. We have to deal with the youth. But sometimes they take guys like myself because we know what we've been through. I've been the oldest of 9 kids. I done watched my mama sell drugs and everything else. So when I go out to the youth, most of the youth I deal with in this neighborhood, they uncles and daddies did bits with me. They tell them prison stories about what I did in prison. So they, oh, you did that? Then I get them. Yeah, well, look, we're not going to do that. We're going here. Because people tell me what I can't do out here with the youth. But I'm the same guy that chased guys off the yard in prison that was under 25 and told them you can't have yard until you go to school and get a GED. So you can't tell me what we can't do out here. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. I don't go get no grant. I get up every morning, I deal with the youth that's out here. And you have to take them one at a time. I commend people that's out here helping because it's not enough of us. I started my organization in 2005. I was helping guys come home from transition. 2010, they came over a report said that Washington County had the highest recidivity rate. I'm dealing with guys on parole. And I'm saying, how is this? I'm looking at statistics. I'm saying, this is not true. So it made me go do my own research. And when I did the research, I found out that the highest recidivity rate was true, but it was 13 to 19. The youth. Back and forth. So all I'm saying to myself is, wow, that's how I got caught up. You do a small crime, they let you out. You do another small crime, and then by the time you 17, 15, by the time 16, 17 years old, you desensitized. They don't want to hear that. You got a career record already at 17, so when you get locked up, it's easy for us to lock us up, we black, because they done built the crime up for us. They don't do that with white kids. Little Johnny, pat him on he gone on. You don't see him no more. So we have to stop. It's like you say, I go and deal with the youth, and I'm trying to make this brief as possible. I deal with the youth, but when you put some in the youth and you go back to the house and the house is corrupt, you know what I'm saying? It takes the village. When we go in there and deal with the youth, we got to go in there the same and deal with the whole house. The mother, the stepfather, the kids. You got to deal with the whole thing. You can't go and deal with one child because it's not going to work. You got to reach the mama first because that's the house. So I commend y'all, and I think I took enough of y'all time.
Oh, no,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you. Appreciate the work that you're doing. Is there anyone else that has any questions? All right.
How you doing tonight? I guess the question would be,
with our youth and everything is, as professionals, how many of you guys really investing back into your communities, or to not professional wise, but like buying property and starting gardens and selling back to the community, whereas just going to work and doing what you do and then go home to your life, and you got a nice bed to sleep in, but the youth is still out there. So how many of you guys really invest back into your community? And I say this personally, because I'm going to school to become a construction engineer, and I'm becoming a developer. And that's one of my goals to do. I see out in Ypsi, Sharon, I'm trying to buy some property out there, and it's hard. Like you said, you can't really get property because they see me trying to buy some property out there, some commercial property, and they shut it down. They told me it wasn't for sale anymore. But, I got ways to go around it. But how many people are investing back into the livelihood of black youth like that, and bringing a teacher in, say, hey, I got this garden. I want you to teach them how to grow. I want you to teach them how to sell back into the community like that. Just different things like that. This is not a job for me. It's my life.
Yeah.
And my kids will attest to this. For 35 years, I've been in the office at 6 o'clock a.m. every morning. I rarely get home before 8 p.m. I'm part of Ceasefire Detroit. I spend a lot of time with current gang members, former gang members, listening, validating them, teaching them. What they need from people like me is time and your ear and your heart. And so that's my life. That's why Leela knew she could call me, because when I get called, a man answers the call. I rarely say no to our young guys. They have my home number, which is crazy. But the real thing that I think that a professional can give them is to let them know the truth, that it really was not easy for you. You were not all that we see now. And so they need to know the processes, because they're instant gratification generation. But they need to understand the processes, and that it is a marathon, and it's not a sprint.
That's what I think about, because like he said, you need resources.
Yes.
And as a person, I've been through the system and all that too, but growing up. But as a person, I teach my kids. I got 5 boys, and now I got my nephews that coming back, and they're trying to start businesses with me and everything. And I try to reach out. I don't have room to take anybody in. I got, like I said, all my kids are grown almost, and they're still all at home. So I'll try to get them out. So I can't bring nobody else in. But I like that system where you want to have somebody, and I want to take them and kids like that, and have them start up, like vegetarians here at Seventh-day Adventist Church. To have a place where they can grow gardens, and they become agricultural engineers and stuff like that, so they can grow from there and start businesses up. They can have somewhere they go. I know back in the day they used to have the youth program and everything, and all that's pretty much demolished because they don't have people to keep continuing on in it, and they got a lot of fights in there. But as professionals, which that's what I say, I'm trying to get back into something, and hopefully in the near future it's going to happen. I just want to know how many people are investing back into the community themselves, not professional wise, but But
I buy a lot of books, and I pass them on. That's the biggest things I do is I put books in young men's hands, and I ask them, if you can't read it, don't be afraid to tell me. Let's find a way to read it, because a lot of them only can go as 2-mile square radius of their homes. Books and learning to read can take you all around the world, and a lot of times they need something to hang their hat on, just learning how to read, just learning how to do math, and they take off from there. So I encourage books and putting things in their hand.
I also sing, and I tap into a lot of the young people's talents. I've recorded and I've taken kids into the studio, helped them get recorded, invested in them. Because a lot of talents, these kids are really, really hooked in. And it really helps build their self-esteem. So I help them in that area. And then a lot of youth, I taught some life skills classes at Vista Maria a couple years ago. And at the end of the 8-week semester, I gave the cards out to the kids because I had resources to tell them, this is where you need, if you need housing, where can you get? So a lot of kids still call me, and I still connect them to resources in the community for them.
As far as investing in the community, Leah and I have gone back and forth on this vision of this SIL or residential facility, that how we would envision it would go. But the more I think about it, there's a lot of these things are driven by politics, grants, like you mentioned earlier, funding. With different changes with the new administration, a lot of this funding is drying up even faster than before. So now it's gone from how do we get it grant funded to figuring out how to independently fund it. And so it becomes a challenge because you have to put a whole nother business plan together. But stay tuned. It's going one day, one day.
Lord willing.
Lord willing.
I grew up I didn't grow up in this area. I grew up in a place that was not unlike Detroit, though. Not very many places in England have had riots, but where I grew up in Tottenham, there were riots. That's where, when I was a child, that's where we lived before we were able to move from there onwards. My parents were immigrants and got there. It's one of my saddest memories that I think about, that I can't help that community, because it's pretty much as it was when I left it, probably worse. And I can't help that community. But I'm very passionate about doing what I can to be able to help similar communities here. And it's hard to divorce what you do professionally from not. So many doctors will try and see as many patients as possible, because the more patients you see, the faster you get them through, the more money you make. That's what you're supposed to do. For me, that's not what I'm supposed to do. If I have somebody in my office and they're there for a sore throat, but they can't read, we need to address the fact that you can't read. And let's talk about that for half an hour. Let's do what we can. And so the Lord has allowed me to be able to spend that more time. There is some sort of ramifications to that, because you don't bring in as many RVUs, as they call it, and you do kind of get in trouble. But it's important. What else can you do? Mentoring. I don't have sort of practical skills, like I can't teach somebody to plant a garden, can't even teach them to cook, but I can mentor them in the things that I am able to do. And so it's very important to me every year to have young students come through, and I'll go and present in different venues so that people can see that you can make it. You can come from Tottenham and make it. You can come from Detroit and, quote, make it. Whatever the make it is, whatever goal that God has put in your heart to achieve, you can get there. And society doesn't really support that. Professions don't actually support that. In my particular profession, if you want to advance, you need to get the grants, you need to write the papers, you need to study the right areas, and doing community-based work is not valued. So there's a personal detriment to actually doing that, but again, you have to know what your real priorities are in life and what your purpose is. And I think, as you've pointed out, the purpose really needs to be to give back to the community, and so hopefully the Lord will take care of the rest while one tries to help in the only ways that you know how.
Next.
God bless. My name is Ronald Wilson. I'm a lifelong Ypsilanti citizen. And I'd just like to thank the panel for being here today. You know, we have an officer here, a doctor, and a judge. And I had actually taken time to volunteer over at AME, and I was with Aaliyah's mother. And I met Aaliyah, and she told me she had this zeal in her heart, and she had a great desire to help and to mentor young men. And I was ecstatic that she, talked with me about that. And I just can't begin to say the words of how I felt, her desire to help other folk. This is a formidable thing that's facing the black community, and it's going to be critical to be engaged. A young man there with the green mic, he was saying about really being engaged and how important it is. I guess the whole panel has discussed that, but I really appreciate the panel for being here. And most young people that excel and young adults, usually the percentage of them have good coaches in their life, good counselors. You know, for me, it was a pastor in my life, a teacher. And these things are critical, and I hope that much of the message today for the young people really caught their ear, you know, because everyone in here is either a parent or an uncle or a friend, and it's going to take people being engaged. So basically, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say that I'm glad to be here today, and I'm glad to see the officer here and judge, and, you know, the panel taking its time, and Aaliyah. This is a very important question to the life of our community. And we must try to be engaged and to do what's proper, even if you have to reach out to someone, because there's a lot of people failing. There's a lot of people who may be in a household with one parent, never had a father figure. And I usually try to stay engaged with many programs like Steve Harvey's, truly try to step in with a lot of people. Young men are missing guidance, and I think that's some of the things that were brought out. People need guidance. Young people don't really understand when they're young, and they need adults, an uncle or a friend to give them good guidance, you know, and I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just glad to be here today.
Hello, I'm a senior at Eastern Michigan studying public health, and I feel like it's imperative for me to understand what I can do now to help the youth, because I really want to get involved in doing things now to help me professionally, to see what there is out there. Like, are there things that the youth can do to help them, to help other youth in this community, or are there things that you would like to see put in place, like initiatives started, things at Eastern in the community? Are there things out there that we could get started now, or that we can get more people on board to help out with?
I would like to see homicides amongst black on black be a public health issue across the country. For as many lives as we've lost through violence, that's a public health issue. And it's going to be your generation. And I'm so glad to see you out here and see who you are. It's going to be your generation's platform and assignment to get that understood. Thank you.
I think that in public health, this generation has a grasp on technology that previous generations did not have. You have the ability to counter this level of stupidity that's out there with something that's actually positive and informative to the masses, because they now have it in their hands. So this generation has the ability to spread more, to share more, that is positive, and make more awareness, as he said, to whether it be diseases, health, homicide, whatever it may be.
Practical perspective on my end, when I see a young African American, especially a woman, in your position, what I would like to see at your level is you mentoring someone else. Because I think as a kid, you want to associate with people who are doing things that you think they want to do. So Leah's daughter today ran up to me and goes, "I'm going to law school." And she rattles off 90,000 questions in 2 minutes. And Leah finally says, "Okay, stop talking. We got to start." But the point is, at her age, she has an interest in law. And if she can't connect with someone that looks like her and maybe came from the same background that she has, to show them, here is the way to do it. It's more than just 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of law school, take the bar, get a job. There's more to that. And so if you know there's someone in your community, and I know we did it as black law students and not so much in undergrad, but there were all these programs where we reached out to other youth that wanted to do the same things that we weren't doing yet, but we were a little bit closer than they were, and just kind of keeping them on track to where they wanted to be. And I think if we touch those people directly and not so much in this indirect manner they will, one, be bonded with you and feel like you're one of them. And I think that's really important, to make people feel comfortable around you and not make them feel that you sit above them. But I appreciate you for being here too, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I think it's wonderful. Please, round of applause. I think it's wonderful the field that you're going into, and the fact that you're about to graduate with this degree and then going to mentor others, as was just recommended by the judge. And I would say, keep going. So I'm feeling really bad that I didn't know that you were about to graduate with your bachelor's degree in public health. But please, let's talk about it. Go on, do your PhD, and you'll be able to do so much to help the community. And there's so many resources, as Sister Taylor would say, there's so many resources in this community. And as a bright young black woman, you can make such a difference. So congratulations and keep going.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shirley, and you'll understand this. I'm a reading intervention teacher for 6th grade. My students are what we classify as the bottom 30% in the building. I don't speak to anybody who reads, who is less than 2-3 years below reading level. So when we have a student like that, their behavior is off the chain. So, you know, they're 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're getting ready for you. I started out teaching kindergarten, but the thing that I keep hearing as I go to these kind of meetings is, well, there's a parent, the parent. The problem is not just that there isn't resources, because in the United States, racism isn't just black and white, it's green. So if you have money, you can do anything you want to do. You can slap a police officer because you're not going to jail, okay, if you got some money, because Uncle such and such is coming to get you out. That's the real truth. But what I see in dealing with parents and dealing with kids over and over and over, the issue is that there is not a parent. The parents don't know how to parent. And I think that's something, because, you know, we've been in church for the last 1,000 years, and yes, we've had this conversation, you know, should we have drums, blah, blah, blah. I think that we need to offer some real parenting classes. The judge can't say it, but it's okay to slap the stank out of your child sometime, because I'm in charge, okay? It's okay. You can't say it. You can't say it. My children are wooden spoon survivors, okay? The parasite can't tell the host what to do, okay? But I think that we need to offer some real practical parenting classes. This is how you feed the child. The child has to go to sleep before 10 o'clock at night. The child has to be respectful to other adults, because we might think it's cute, but I used to teach kindergarten. Your 5-year-old talking back to me is not cute. Okay, and I would never admit having done anything to a kid in a classroom, but timeout chair is worn out by the end of the school year. I mean, it's the truth. If we don't teach people how to parent, somebody else is going to teach them how to parent, or they're going to parent them for you. The weed man, the person who wants to traffic them. But the real underlying issue, okay, because we cannot override a parent. Okay, I can tell you all day long that your daughter needs to cover up her body when she goes to school. If you don't agree with that, I'm just blowing the air. So I really think that in our churches, as I go to a Michigan conference church, so you know it's a whole other difference, okay? But I really think that we need to really, especially in our black churches, because that's where it's going to happen first, we need to offer some real parenting classes. You having a baby, let's have a community baby shower, and then let's sit mama and daddy down and say, this is what you need to do, okay, on a real practical basis. We can pray all day long, but if you don't teach people how to do it, okay, so that was, I've been waiting all day to say that.
I have a comment in that regard, and mine is obviously a different perspective because I get a kid or a family after it's kind of gone left. But the Court of Appeals has given the circuit court, which is where I sit, the authority, although we technically have jurisdiction over a child only, we now have limited jurisdiction over that parent if the parent's behavior is affecting the child's behavior. And so now we have the ability to say, Mom, the teacher has come to court. The teacher has said her body parts are hanging out. We keep telling you, now you got to go to parenting classes. And if Mom doesn't go to parenting classes, Mom goes to jail.
I taught parenting classes for the Madeira program, and that's where I got a real vision of racism is green.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay? Right. Because the other people who had to come to the class so they can get their babies back, okay, their kids, or they committed some kind of crime, they were trying to keep them out of jail. Okay, they just come whisk through the class and keep on going, and Johnny's behavior is not going to change. But Johnny, they could either go to the class or go to jail. So that's when I would see them. I couldn't do that anymore because it's like so fair. But still, we just need to teach people how to parent their kids. You know, and it's okay.
And let me clarify that, because I see recordings and things, and I want to be real clear. There is no problem with disciplining your child. You don't see what I see. I just got assigned the case where the young lady allegedly delivered a baby and wrapped it up and threw it in a garbage can. So we're not talking about a spanking. You cannot leave marks on your children. So there's a clear difference, and I won't tell you how I raised my children, and I won't tell you how my parents raised me, because I am sitting here as a judge. But what I will say is, when we are talking about corporal punishment, what we see in a courtroom, I've seen children handcuffed to beds because they wouldn't stop running away from home. I've seen children beat with bricks. I mean, I got beat with switches, and I thought that was pretty bad. But when you see what we see in the court is there is a big distinction between discipline and abuse. So there. No.
But if there is consistent discipline, then you don't get to abuse. Because there's an understanding in the house that this is how you're going to act in my house.
Well, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, we totally get everything.
I'll tell you this. I invite everybody to walk into the courtroom. Courtroom, at least mine, is public, and I can't close court unless I put on the record why I'm closing court, and there has to be a valid reason that the Court of Appeals will support. So I get your position, and I think for a lot of people have an idea of how court works, and in real life it doesn't. It's nothing. It's not Law and Order. It's not that fancy. But I would challenge everybody, if it's not my courtroom or you all live in Washtenaw County, visit a Washtenaw County court and see how our kids are being dealt with, and then you will have a better understanding of why the kids sometimes are being dealt with the way that they are.
Well, I didn't want to ask a question either. I just want to make a couple of comments. And I appreciate all of you, because all of you are right on point as far as how you see the black child. I say our society is broken. Every aspect of our society that you look at today, it's broken. You all play an intricate part in the broken society by trying to step in with these broken parts to help put them back together. But I'm here to say it's never gonna be together. Never, until the society turns to God. He's already said, if you're reading your Bible, he's already said what's going to happen. And if he said it, you can count on it. And if he said it, nobody can change it. Nobody can change it because he said that times are getting worse and worse and worse. Whatever we do, we're not going to change the times from getting worse, but what we can do is what he told us to do. That young man that stood up and gave his testimony should not have to go out and find a mentor.
Amen.
You're sitting here listening to him. He shouldn't have to go find his own mentor. God has put us here. He has a plan. He knows. He wrote the book. He's told us what's going to happen. But he's also told us that believe in him, what we have to do. My question is, are we doing it? We know what's going on out there with the young black child. We know what kinds of things they're in. What are we doing? Are we sitting in forums and discussing it? And then when the forum is over with, thank you very much, and go home. But the young black kid is still out there. We have a commission. Those who believe and is trying to follow God and what he has told us to do, he's commissioned us to go out. Just like she said on the end, are we our brother's keeper? Or are we just talking about our brother? It's never going to change. It's never going to change until we go out and help somebody. That's what I say. Sitting in the church, listening to sermons,
Come on.
and saying, see you next week.
Come on.
And coming back, that's not helping what's going
That's right.
on out there.
That's right.
The officer talked about the young black guy, and believe me, I know firsthand about discrimination because I worked at City Hall here in Ypsilanti for 27 years. I was the only black there. The first black there when I worked there, and I know what it's like, the discrimination, because I would answer the phone sometime, and I'm being black, and people are thinking that I'm white because of my voice, and they start talking about the black people in this. And I guess I don't do well with that because I see too much discrimination. So I'm like, city manager, take this phone call. I ain't talking to this lady no more. Was what happened, Pat? I answered the phone and this lady started talking about the black people. And I answered the phone once when there was a Ku Klux Klansman. Said, yeah, patch me up to the city manager's office, okay? I want to let him know how to get rid of the black people in it. I took that phone call. So I know that there's discrimination going on, but it's never going to stop. Who in here thinks that it's going to be eradicated? No, because the world is getting worse. It's not getting better. God has just told us what we should do, and we should do what he told us to do. It's good that we're trying to help in any way we can the young black youth. We're trying to help that. But I would say the best help we can give them is to go outside these doors, go outside our homes, go to the byways and the highways. Because I'm going to tell you something. Some of these black youth, go to their homes. You'll be surprised. And you won't be surprised at how they got there's a better way. If they don't see it, they're going to still go for what they feel that's going to get them through. Because like everybody said, racism is calculated. It's set up, and it's set up against black people. I can say that. I've been around, and I know that. And we're never going to change it. Never going to change racism. God didn't say that we're going to stop it. But he did say that we can help our brother to get through. This young man right here can be helped. He can be mentored so that he can raise up to the point where he's going to reach back like this man did and help his brother. That's how you do that. But I ain't going to take, okay, then I'm saying that.
Well, I don't know how to, follow Ms. Mills. But no, I honestly came just to make a couple comments and more so to the audience than our panel, but thank you all for being here. My name is Nicole Brown, and I currently serve as the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Ypsilanti. All right. I am, and so my first comment is along the lines of how I got there. I am the youngest person ever elected to council in Ypsilanti, and I'm a young black female. I'm a millennial, so the age gap between me and my peers is vast. But I want to tell our young people and the parents in the room that I didn't go to school saying I was going to be in politics or I was going to serve in this capacity. I didn't know a couple months before I decided to run that I was going to be doing it. Ms. Leah knows. She knows the story. But mentors and positive role models are really what impacted me to be, a partner in the community, to give back and to be a catalyst of change in the community when I came here. And I'm not originally from Ypsilanti, but I decided to stay and to really reinvest in the community that gave a lot to me as a young person when I did get here. The second thing that I wanted to say is that there are a few things that I'm working on with the city that I think would be really beneficial to some of our young people. I'm currently the chair of a task force. It's the Community Police Relations Task Force, and we are working diligently to create an actual committee that is charter-driven, a commission in the city of Ypsilanti that will also have positions for young people. Just last Tuesday at our council meeting, we added to our charter, we updated it to add 2 young people to our Human Relations Commission that can serve on that board. And so those are opportunities for young folks to get involved at an early age, to see what, being a public servant is all about, but also to have their voice at the table. That is the most important part of the work that I do. I'm here because I was able to sit at the table. Somebody thought that it was a good idea to bring me in, not knowing what I was going to contribute, just to say, hey, come on. I know you have something to share, and so it has been my duty, and one of the things that I've been working on is to create more avenues and more spaces for that in our community as it is right now. The other thing is that we're coming up on our budget work, and those of you who know anything about Ypsi, we are in a little bit of a strange situation with our budget. But one thing that we're really working hard on, and I am fighting for, is to really make sure that we are working to create the opportunity to give funding back to particular areas in our community. The South Side is where I represent in Ward 1 with Councilperson Richardson, Park Ridge Community Center, and trying to make sure that we carve out funds to make sure we keep those doors open, the community pool open, and giving safe spaces and really safe opportunities for our young folks. And also I do a lot of mentoring, so we're talking about resources and things you need. By day, I'm a social worker. I work for a children's mental health agency in Wayne County. And by day and night, I'm a council person. So my work all together is really community-driven, really public servant-driven, really, investing in all the things that we're talking about here. So if ever anyone has any questions or needs anything, you have all of my contacts, and I can give it to anyone else. It's on the website. It's public knowledge. Please reach out to me, because I am here in this community. I live in the community. I graduated high school in this community. I went to Eastern Michigan University, and I'm here really to reinvest in the community and make sure that our young people have something to hold on to that is tangible and that is positive. And that is all right.
I have a question. I've listened to many panels like this, and many of us have. what is the one thing that we as a community can do? You know, not 20 things, not 50 ideas. We've heard a lot, obviously, and we're going to continue to hear more and more as we continue to age. What is the one thing that we as a community can do? And I consider you guys a think tank, and maybe you guys can take, you know, a couple of seconds, i.e. minutes. The one thing that we can do, that we can implement, that will have the greatest impact in our community, so that our kids, I have a 12-year-old, I have a 8-year-old, and you know, there are many young kids here, so that the next generation, we can reverse this carnage that we've seen for decades. No one's going to solve it for us. You know, the Koreans have their communities, the Jews have their communities, the Middle Eastern folks have their communities. What is the one big idea? The one, not 20, the one that can be implemented, that can have the greatest impact to reverse this senseless violence and death that we see, that we hear. 6 o'clock, Channel 4 News, carnage, every day. Every day. What is the one thing that we can do to reverse this thing, that we can implement, and that we can take away and say, okay, that is the one thing that we can do to change this? You know, you guys are in the system, you deal with our people when we run through the system. The one thing.
And before we respond, this will be our last question, just for the interest of time. And we will be having a reception, just cookies and punch downstairs. So if you have any additional questions that you would like to ask the panelists, if they are able to stay back and stay around, please feel free to do so at that time. So you can go ahead and answer. But before that, Pastor White, if you would give us closing prayer after they've answered this question, we're going to take up offering. And if you could give us a closing thought and prayer, that would be beautiful. Okay.
I'm going to flip the script a little bit, because I'm a judge, so I get to kind of not answer as many questions. I'm going to ask you, because I know the one thing that I can do. And the one thing that I can do may be different than the one thing that everybody else on this panel can do. So the question becomes, what is the one thing that you can do to help the community? Because I'm doing mine. The question is, and it's a universal you, not you in particular, what can you do to help the community? And then I'm going to let everybody powwow, and maybe we'll come up with one answer, because I didn't really give an answer. So if they want to come up with one, that's going to be great.
I would say that you're asking the wrong person. You're asking a bunch of old people that are...
Thank you.
We're already invested in the community. If we're talking about the youth, then you should be asking the youth. If you want to know how to be impactful with the youth, have the youth come up here and ask them. And a prime example was at one of my schools, I wanted to do a school store. And I had all these ideas, and I said, I'm going to put all this type of waffles and fresh fruits and vegetables in my store and everything. And none of my kids in my school ate any of the food. And we were trying to use it to do a fundraiser. And so I took my sons, Xavier and Paul, with me to Sam's Club. They said, Dad, you're getting the wrong stuff. You need to get honey buns. You need to get hot Cheeto chips, all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I would never buy any of this. But I bought it, and the first time we put it in the store, it sold out. I said, oh. So every time I wanted to fill up the school store, I took my sons with me and asked them, well, what do you think I should get? So if you want to know how to be impactful, and maybe you're not even talking about in the entire community, maybe we're talking about right now the IPSI community, I would say get your children to come up here and ask them and then listen and do it. I don't think it's that hard.
How about I wrap that question up, Paul?
All right. Amen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Keith.
No, you go ahead and wrap it up, sister.
Oh, Officer Elliott, did you have something to share? Go ahead.
He just handed me the mic, but if you want to hear I've had this opinion since I was young, and yes, I'm old too. And that is that I think we're very self-sufficient when it comes to our feelings and not wanting to share and not be vulnerable to one another to talk about what our problems really are. However, too many of us want to, and I speak collectively, are looking to politicians to solve our problems. And our communities need to solve our problems. I don't care whether they're Democrats or liberals or whatever. I think a lot of politicians, a lot of these liberals want to make excuses for us and our youth and saying that we're victims of the system, which in some cases, I'm not saying that's not true, but at the same time, it's time for us and our youth to pick up and say, okay, but I'm not going to wait for you because I might be waiting until kingdom come for you to help me or for you to send help while you're making excuses. But, hi. So I feel like the solution is for us to be more self-sufficient financially, economically, to support each other's businesses. When we have a business, put that money back into the business. Quit worrying about Louis Vuitton purses and whatever Christian Louboutin heels and whatnot, and actually take care of each other, put our money into our own communities, and like I said, stop waiting on other people to help us.
As I think we've suggested, it's a really hard question to answer, and certainly the answer is multifaceted. But I think that as we pray about it, with the spirit that we will do something, that we'll be guided. For myself, from a health standpoint, I think the best thing we can do for our young people and their health is to encourage their education. While I believe in everything about healthcare, with immunizations and preventive medicine and everything else that we can do, one of the best ways to prolong your life and to have the healthiest life possible is to get educated. So from before they're conceived, do what it takes to be sure that they will be educated so that they can achieve all that God has for them to achieve.
All right. And what I will add to that is be available. Just lend yourself to be available. I get calls all hours of the night, the morning, midday, Facebook, whatever it may be. Be available. Don't be too busy. Don't be too busy. Open up yourself. Extend yourself. They just need someone to love and to care, right, and to be there in the absence. If they don't have the resources, God has blessed you enough where you could give a little something. And it's not going to hurt you one bit. And he says when you give, he will bless you on top of that. So that would be my thing. If we stop being a selfish nation, a selfish people, and lend ourselves to others, I think that we could make a significant difference. All right, at this time, I have two young men. I have Varick and Shane that's going to come up, and they're going to actually, we want to take up an offering to continue to have youth programming here at our church. I want to thank our participants, our panelists, for coming out. Let's give them another rousing hand clap. And I have just a small gift for each one of you. Lauren will go ahead and pass them out. And we just say thank you from the Ypsilanti Seventh-day Adventist Youth Department. And my mother is giving out her own hugs and gifts. But at this time, Varick and Shane, if you could, just pass around the offering plate, and we hope that you dig deep, as Brother Brazil said earlier today. Dig deep in your pocket as we continue to try to, again, have good sound programming. Yes, the gift cards are for all of your hard work and labors. Oh, no, I wish it was the 500, but it's a small, small token of our appreciation from our youth department. Treat yourself to a nice lunch or put some gas in your car for when you got to go and try to help. But I hope that you appreciate that, and again, know that we thank you from our youth department from our heart. Pastor White, if you could close us out.
Can the church say amen? Amen. Wow. Come on, say wow with me. Wow. I like to say amen, but we can say wow too. That's all right. Thank you. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. And the thought that was shared at the end, just be available. And I thought of the song. If I knew it, I'd sing it for you. Lord, I'm available to you. You know, when we make ourselves available to God, He'll help us to be available to one another, to the community, to hurting people. It's unfortunate that the fibers in our bodies are naturally selfish. But Jesus says, I'm in the changing business. I can transform you. Yes. There's a beautiful verse in the Bible, and I'm hoping that those who are near a Bible can pick it up. It's the book right before Revelation. Who knows that book? Jude. Let's look at it together. Jude. I'm going to share this verse. It's only one chapter, so it's just Jude, verse 22 and 23. As I listened to what was happening, I was thinking, if I could have asked the question, what are some things that the panel and you think that we can do to counteract the negative messages that we are seeing in media? It's actually laudable and applaudable to get in trouble with some youth. You know, it's a trophy, and they wear it as a badge. So these are some things we can think of. What are some things that we can do? Jude 22. Anybody has that? Will you read that nice and loud for us? Jude 22. I need a volunteer. Got a volunteer.
Be merciful to those who doubt. Save others by snatching them from the fire. To others show mercy mixed with fear, hating even the clothing stained by corrupted flesh.
What version is that? I like the way that reads. No problem. NIV. New International Version. Here's the King James Version reads this way. Of some have compassion. Watch this one. I like this phrase. Making a difference. I think this is what this is all about up here. God has called us to make what? A difference. Make a difference. Because if we don't make a difference, we fail. And as I thought about it a little bit more, Dr. White and myself had the opportunity to share with a congregation in Florida. And as I thought about this thought, making a difference in the lives of others in our communities, young people, youth, truly that's something God will have us to do, to make a difference. But I think He wants to make a difference in our lives. Make ourselves available to Him so He can make a difference in our lives, so that truly we can be equipped to make a difference in the lives of others. All right? No problem. Watch television programs. There's some good television programs. Remember, the Dark Ages was 538 to 1798. Satan could keep people away from the Bible because it was locked up in a language that the common people didn't understand. And so they called it the Dark Ages because the Bible wasn't shining and shedding light and piercing the darkness of minds and hearts. Satan can't keep the Bible from us, but he keeps us from the Bible. We're busy. You know we are. We're busy people. Got important things to do. I'm determined by God's grace. I want him to make a difference in my life. And as I heard Elder Brandon Dent share one time, I want to plug in. Plug into Jesus. Did someone bring an amen with you? You can loan me. Plug into Jesus. You know why? Because he makes all the difference. There's a blessed verse that says, whom the Son sets free. Oh, the blessedness of freedom. You might not have a whole lot in life, but when you've got freedom in Jesus, it's a real good thing. Amen. Let's pray together. Every head is bowed, every eye is closed. We thank you, Jesus, for your sons and daughters that have shared with us. You've equipped them with experience and education. They've shared some things that they've seen, that they've experienced. And we're excited about the fact that you're using them in a positive way to make a difference. And now, Lord, we must also recognize that you want to use us as well. And as your daughter shared, Lord, help us to be available. Lord, we want to make ourselves available to you. Help us not to be sidetracked, neither derailed from a purpose, a particular purpose and a mission to sit at your feet, to spend time with you. We thank you for your goodness. In Jesus' name, everybody says, amen, amen. You are dismissed. I think we have a delicious repast planned downstairs. Thank you so much. Come on up and shake the panelists' hands. You need to give them a hug.